All right, guys. So obviously last night was the first official debate between Trump and Kamala after Biden sort of tacitly admitted that he is a walking corpse and needed to be replaced. And so I have a lot of thoughts about what transpired last night. I got a bunch of clips here loaded up from Aaron Rupar over on Twitter on some of the highlights and some of the lowlights from Kamala and from Trump. But just real quick, in terms of my top line view of what transpired, two different things. Number one, I think that from sort of like a bird's eye view, Kamala Harris definitely won this debate pretty decisively, and not necessarily because she had some like magnificent policy agenda that was bold and left wing and populist and whatever the case may be, but really just relative to Trump, who came across as completely unhinged. She was clearly getting under his skin. She was getting him to fall for the bait time and time again. He was very weak on what the polls say are his strongest issues, like immigration. We'll get to a lot of that here, but again, I think Kamala clearly came away as the decisive winner of this debate in terms of how the American people viewed it. Now, point number two is that it was wild to me how far right we have spun as a country, seeing Kamala Harris take hardline positions on the border and on immigration, seeing her take extremely hawkish positions when it comes to China, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, when it comes to Israel's genocide in Gaza. That was all completely abysmal. She did manage to pummel him on certain issues like abortion seemed to be her strongest issue, and she did absolutely decimate him when it came to that specific issue. But it was kind of just a nightmare from top to bottom. And it was genuinely depressing to see that this is the current state of the Democratic Party, like a complete night and day relative to where the Democrats were on their rhetoric back during the 2020 Democratic primary. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into some of this. Here we have first to start off, Kamala Harris's first statement during the debate, making her pitch on economics. Let's go ahead and listen to what she had to say here.
Your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy.
Okay, so let's be real. That means absolutely nothing. So you come from a working class, a middle class background. You believe in the so-called opportunity economy. Okay, what does that actually mean, right? Now, to be fair, if you look at some of the policies that Kamala has proposed, I've covered it before on this channel, some of the things I agree with, some of the things I disagree with, or I don't think go far enough. Okay, she has some plan to address housing costs. She wants to give like a tax credit for first-time home buyers, right? She has some things here and there that she can point to. Tim Walz, for example, is a major benefit to her candidacy, in my opinion, because in Minnesota, with a very slim majority in the state legislature, he did manage to get past some very popular left-wing policy proposals like, free school lunches and paid family leave, paid sick leave, et cetera, et cetera. But just overall, this means absolutely nothing, right? Tell me about your specific economic proposals. Are you in favor of getting rid of the filibuster, right, in order to pass like an increase to the minimum wage? Are you in favor of the PRO Act? Are you in favor of, like I just said, childcare, family leave, paid sick leave, et cetera? What specifically are you in favor of? But we move on here to Trump's opening statement, which was, let's say, significantly worse. Let's watch a little bit of this.
Yes. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon.
It took every ounce of his being to not use the phrase black jobs in that situation, right? He says that immigrants are coming in, they're stealing jobs that are occupied by Hispanics and by black Americans. Could the pandering be more aggressive in this kind of a situation? That's how you address your economic proposal. That's what the question is here. You can see all of the questions down here at the bottom as we go through these clips. When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? Now, of course, Trump would say We had lower inflation, right? That wasn't much of a crisis during his administration and whatever the case may be. He would say those standard lines. But when you pivot to immigration, as if immigrants are the reason that average working class people are struggling in this country and not the corporate price gouging or corporations exploiting the labor of average working class Americans to the point where massive multi-billion-dollar corporations like Walmart, for example, have employees who are having to get on food stamps and get on other government subsidized programs in order to meet their basic life necessities, that people are working multiple jobs because they are not being paid living wages. Like, nothing to say about any of that. His economic proposal, let's be clear about this, right? His main economic framework is deregulation and tax cuts for billionaires and corporations, things that are absolutely not going to help, but are absolutely going to harm average working class Americans. And so he pivots to this classic right-wing, reactionary, fascist scapegoat here of blaming immigrants for all of the problems that average working class people are facing. So an abysmal statement from him and sort of a vapid nonsense statement from Kamala to start us off. Now we move on. And I'm not going to play all of these clips. I'm sort of just going to read through some of these and I'll get to some of the more interesting ones. But here we had Harris pointing out that Trump left the economy in shambles in the wake of COVID and the economic turmoil that was happening during 2019, 2020 and January 6th and the attack on democracy. And she brings up Project 2025, which strategically is probably a good move. Trump, as we're going to get to here in a second, tried to distance himself from Project 2025. And it didn't really go well, I guess, because he kind of pretended like he didn't know what Project 2025 was, even though he's employed at this point over 100 people who have worked on Project 2025. And if you read some of the main tenets of Project 2025 and compare it to his agenda, it's not that far off. So the idea that like you're trying to separate yourself from it, okay, I understand that from a political perspective. It's extremely unpopular. Some of the more recent polling that I've seen on it shows that Project 2025 has like less than a 20% approval amongst the American people. So it's great branding here from the Democrats to try to attach Trump to Project 2025. And honestly, I don't think it's an unfair attack there, right? Because again, his agenda does overlap significantly with Project 2025, even if he personally doesn't believe in every single plank of this 900-page document. It was written by the Heritage Foundation. Okay, so let's not pretend as if Trump has nothing to do with this. He would never associate himself with it, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go ahead and watch how he handled a little bit of this here.
That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference.
Okay, so which ones are good and which ones are bad? Do you care to be specific? Some parts of 2025, Project 2025 are bad. Some parts are good. Which ones? Which ones do you support? Which ones are you against?
I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic.
Okay, so now we move on. Here's another one. Let's watch the second clip here on the same response.
Create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run.
Okay, to be fair, she has copied a lot from the Biden administration. That part's absolutely true. She's also brought over a lot of the people from the failed Biden campaign, and I think that's been an absolute disaster for her campaign. That's why the polls are neck and neck, even though she had this initial massive wave of enthusiasm when Biden stepped aside and she became the candidate. She had an opportunity there to separate herself from Biden. She chose not to, right? Both on policy and in terms of many of the people who she's surrounding herself with. So that part of it is relatively true. She did kind of like copy and paste a lot of the things from the Biden administration. But again, in terms of Project 2025, in terms of, I mean, the literal quote here is he says, we're going to create like great money for the country, big money for the country. What the fuck does that mean? What does that actually mean? What are the actual policies that you support, other than just vague, vapid nonsense? But we move on here because we also had Donald Trump calling Kamala Harris a Marxist. A Marxist. Okay, let's watch this.
I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy, but if she ever got elected, she'd change it, and it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. I was going to say.
Okay, so the math is not mathing there. Okay. Over 1 million people a month coming into the country, but in his view, it's only 21 million, right? Which is an overestimation based on other estimations that he even just was discussing there, right? So the math does not exactly add up to that being over 1 million people coming into the country every single month. But to get to the core of this clip, Kamala Harris, guys, I'm not the end-all be-all of Marxist philosophy or material analysis or having a socialist perspective, but I do happen to be a socialist political commentator. I wish deeply in my soul that Kamala Harris was the embodiment of the worst nightmare of whatever Donald Trump or Republicans believe that she is. I wish that she was a Marxist, but she's not. She is a standard neoliberal corporatist Democrat. That's what she is. That's what she's always been for the most part, right? Now, she's been sort of a shapeshifter, and she's changed her positions from the 2020 Democratic primary and from when she was a senator. I think that maybe she believes taking more right-wing, reactionary, or safe positions on some of these issues now is politically beneficial for her. But one thing you can say for absolute certainty is that Kamala Harris, regardless of what her father was, because I do believe her father was a Marxist, but Kamala Harris is not a Marxist by any stretch of the definition that you could possibly give it, right? Now, again, notice he just went in the same sentence. He said, she's copying many of my policies, which is almost true, right? She's copying many of the right-wing reactionary Trump policies, so I almost gave her a MAGA hat. But then once she gets elected, then she'll transform into this evil Marxist dictator or something. I mean, he's all over the fucking place. And this is how the entire debate was going. Now, it escalates from here, because here we have Trump, and I believe this was the only time that Tim Walz was mentioned during this debate by Trump, where he confused the former governor of Virginia with the former governor of West Virginia while trying to claim falsely that Democrats support murdering babies after they're born, right? Because the standard position from Republicans now is so extreme and so disliked by your average American that they have to pivot to, instead of talking about what the consequences are of their own abortion-related policies, they pivot to, well, let's just try to pretend like Democrats are so extreme that they not only support abortion rights, right, but they also support murdering babies after they're born. That's what he's trying to do here. So let's go ahead and watch this.
Voters, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates.
Okay, so clearly, again, he's trying to sort of run from the fact that he appointed the Supreme Court justices that led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and then you had all of these conservative states around the country that imposed draconian right-wing abortion crackdowns, right? And Kamala was calling him out on this throughout the entirety of the debate, and that was honestly her strongest issue. She did pretty well when it came to the issue of abortion. I'll give her that credit. But, like, what the fuck are we doing here, guys? We still have this narrative, this idea that Democrats support murdering babies, killing babies after they're born. You know what that's called, right? Legally, in every single state across the country, Democrat and Republican alike, that's called murder. If you give birth to a healthy baby and then you kill it, that's called murdering a child. That's what that is in every single state around the country, right? So this is just a completely made up bullshit narrative where Republicans are trying to make the Democratic side of the equation seem more extreme, right? our policies of forcing, women who are victims of incest or rape to carry their rapist baby to term, that's not extreme. It's actually them that are extreme because they're murdering babies after they're born. I mean, it's a very clear tactic of what's going on here, and it's completely false. It's completely made up. This is not happening. And in situations which are extraordinarily rare, if you look at the percentages of when abortions happen, a majority of them, I believe, take place in the first trimester. Then there's some subset that take place in the second trimester. If you're talking about abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy, every single time that would happen, I would feel very confident saying this. Every single time that kind of a situation plays out, which is extraordinarily rare, it would be because there is an extreme situation where either the baby is non-viable, it's not going to live, it's not going to make it, or the mother's life is immediately in jeopardy and the mother is going to die. Those are the only situations that kind of a procedure would take place. He acts as if women all across the country are getting pregnant and then they're waiting until the 9th month and then just randomly deciding, you know what? I don't really feel like having this kid anymore, so I'm just going to have an abortion. That is not happening. It's just not happening. Now, they continue here, right? So we had some fact checks that were going on. Of course, Republicans were pissed off about the fact that Trump was getting fact checked more so than Kamala. In fact, I think exclusively Trump was the only one getting fact checked throughout this debate. Now, I'm sort of split on this because my gut says don't do fact checks at all and just have, Kamala do the fact checking of Trump and Trump do the fact checking of Kamala, because that's sort of a more neutral approach generally to these kinds of debate situations. But there were several moments throughout this debate where Trump was saying shit that's just so obviously false that I'm like, well, do you say something about that? If he's saying that it's legal in certain states to murder babies after they're born, as we're going to get to here in a second, if he says that Haitian migrants are stealing and eating people's pets in Ohio, do you say anything about that, or do you just let that slide as if that's a fact when it's obviously not? I don't know. I mean, you guys tell me where you stand in terms of the fact checks that were taking place. But this was one of them. He got fact checked on his lies about abortion, and Kamala then hammered home the point that, he's a liar, whatever. And then they continued, and Kamala Harris hammered him on abortion and made the case against abortion bans. Let's listen to this, because this was probably her strongest moment in this debate.
To agree, the government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
Okay, so a couple of different things on that. He went on to dispute the idea that he would sign a national abortion ban. He also went on to say that there's no chance, given the roughly 50-50 split in Congress and the Senate, or the House and the Senate, that Kamala would be able to codify abortion rights through the legislative process. Now, on that second point, that's probably true, right? Which is why I was extremely disappointed that Kamala didn't say at any point throughout this debate that she would be willing to get rid of the filibuster to pass some of these policies. And that puts into jeopardy like a majority of her, promised agenda, is that if you have the filibuster intact, which is inherently an incredibly undemocratic, institution, right? Or policy that we have in place here in this country, if you're not willing to get rid of the filibuster, then how are you going to pass any of these things? Because I don't think anybody reasonably believes that Democrats are going to end up with some sort of a supermajority in the House and the Senate. And so you can say, like Biden said, and like I also believe that Obama said, that you're going to codify abortion rights or to reinstitute the standards of Roe v. Wade, but if you're not willing to get rid of the filibuster, how exactly do you plan on doing that? That's an entirely fair point. Now, most of what she was responding to here, when she says, nobody wants these kinds of horrifying situations to play out with incest and with rape, etc., she was responding to the same lie that we have heard over and over and over again from Trump, which is just incredible amounts of cope from him, where he claims that every Democrat, every Republican, every independent, every legal scholar wanted Roe v. Wade to be overturned. They wanted the issue to be returned to the states. And that is absolutely demonstrably untrue. A vast majority of the country wanted Roe v. Wade to stay in place, right? Now, he makes this kind of bullshit argument that, oh, well, it's more democratic to return it to the states. No, it's not. No, it's not. Listen, there are some things that should be off the table, right? If tomorrow Wyoming wants to vote to take away the free speech rights of Black Americans, they shouldn't be able to do that. I don't think that you should have a process in place where conservative states are able to just strip away fundamental rights from an entire group of people, in this case, women, right? That they should be able to vote to get rid of the rights of women to have control over their own bodies because you happen to live in a conservative state. And then you lead to all of these horrific situations playing out that Kamala was just describing there with rape and with incest. And so he continues to just lie and lie and lie about this because he understands that on abortion, that's probably his weakest issue. He understands that. And so he just lies about it, right? Now we continue here, right? We also had, this was amazing. Trump was asked again, would he veto a national abortion ban if it came to his desk? And he basically just threw J.D. Vance totally under the bus. Let's go ahead and watch this clip.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't.
So J.D. Vance said that, yes, Trump would veto an abortion ban if it came to his desk. And Trump is saying, no, I didn't say that. Okay. All right. Just throwing him under the bus. Listen, many people have brought up this point. The last vice president that Trump had was Mike Pence. And what ended up happening to Mike Pence? He was threatened with hanging by Donald Trump supporters on January 6th. So what's the over-under on the timetable for that potentially happening to J.D. Vance as well? I don't know. You guys tell me. Trump also said that he's been a leader on IVF, which he dutifully points out here is fertilization. Okay, I think he just learned that word maybe yesterday. We also had Kamala Harris with, I think, a pretty good dig here on Trump and his rally sizes. And this is where it really started to get under Trump's skin. Let's watch this clip here real quick.
Instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter.
He does.
He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires.
Listen, she's 100% correct. I don't know if you guys have watched any of these Trump rallies, but that's all that it is. I mean, I've seen countless examples of people falling asleep in his rallies, people leaving his rallies early. He does get caught on these side tangents where he starts talking about Hannibal Lecter. And the reason he talks about Hannibal Lecter so much is just amazing, right? He talks about Hannibal Lecter because he's trying to connect Hannibal Lecter to asylum seekers and asylum seekers to insane asylums in foreign countries where people are migrating from to the United States. So it's really just a fundamental misunderstanding from Trump on what the asylum process actually means. In his mind, and somehow nobody in his circle has corrected him on this or they just don't care, but in his mind, insane asylums are the same thing as like releasing people into the country through the asylum process. He thinks those are the same concept, right? So he keeps bringing up Hannibal Lecter. He brings up like how, electric batteries or renewable energy is bad because windmills are killing the birds and the whales. And if I was stuck on a boat and it was powered by electricity, then would I rather get electrocuted by the battery or would I rather jump into the ocean with sharks? It's like his rallies are completely deranged. It's just sort of like a stream of thought, incoherent mess that people clearly, even some of his most diehard supporters who show up to the rallies, can't bear for that long, right? Now, we also had, again, Trump triggered here. Let's see how he handled this sort of dig at him. Now, notice, right? Again, this is an example of him getting baited by Kamala, right? Because she attacked him on his rally sizes and people leaving early. And so the question down here, notice it, the question is supposedly on his strongest issue. It's on immigration. The question is about, why did the Biden administration wait until 6 months before the election to take action on immigration? So perfect example, a perfect opportunity here for you to attack them on that, right? Why didn't you do something about immigration? Instead, he can't help himself.
President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
I mean, it's just amazing. He can't help himself. He can't help himself. That was a layup topic here. This is immigration. This is supposed to be your strongest issue. Now, the question specifically was actually more difficult because the question was the Biden administration put up an incredibly right-wing, reactionary, Republican-led immigration bill. And Republicans were all on board. Remember, it was written by, I think it was the Oklahoma Senator James Lankford. And they were all on board. And then Trump stepped in and he said, no. I don't want to fix immigration. I want to run on immigration. And so he has no answer for the question of why did you sabotage that bill? If you want a draconian crackdown on the border, there it was. You sabotaged it because you would rather run on the border chaos and the migrant issue, as your 2024 platform. And so it was an impossible question for him because he has no answer. And so he pivots to his rallies, I guess. Now, again, pretty fucking pathetic, right? Now, we also have this. Now, here we go, guys. We have Trump spreading this claim that Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, have been stealing and eating residents' pets. I got a lot to say about this. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Jesus Christ.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again.
Okay, so keeps talking about his rallies, but let's address the first thing here, okay? This originated, as far as I'm aware, with a Facebook post from somebody who said they knew somebody who knew somebody who claimed that one of their Haitian, migrant neighbors in Springfield, Ohio, had eaten a cat. Okay, guys, I cannot understate how big of a story this has become in right-wing online spheres. Now, whether or not this is something that people watching this debate at home are even aware of, I honestly doubt that a majority of people have heard about this story, and so they're probably sitting there like, what the fuck is he talking about? They're eating people's dogs. But the story itself is utter and complete bullshit. It is some of the most racist shit that I have ever seen from the modern Republican Party. There have been other previous stories like Venezuelan migrants are taking over apartment complexes in Colorado and they're shaking people down and whatever. I didn't get a chance to talk about those. Those were, relatively close to being almost as insane as this story. But guys, we are talking about a completely made up story with no verifiable evidence whatsoever that Haitian migrants who have legally migrated to Springfield, Ohio, right? And by the way, you hear from some of the companies in this town and some of the other people in this town, and they say these people are great. They're kind. They show up to church. They're showing up to work on time. They're clean. They're everything, etc. You have some mixed reviews from some of the people in this town, but they have come up with this narrative that Haitians are coming to this town, stealing people's pets and consuming them in mass. Like this is a widespread problem to Republicans right now. I have seen countless memes, AI-generated images on Twitter over the last couple of days, posted by Trump, posted by his kids, posted by JD Vance, posted by every right-wing influencer online that you could possibly imagine. AI-generated images. One of them, it was incredibly egregious. It was Trump, an AI-generated image of Trump holding a kitten in his arm. And behind him were like dark-skinned zombies chasing after him. This is where we've gotten in this country. We have AI-generated memes of Trump saving kittens from the hordes of Haitian zombies who are trying to steal and eat people's pets. Guys, another thing, just as an example here, in terms of how brazenly racist this entire narrative has become, I saw a post from Benny Johnson, prominent right-wing influencer, whatever the fuck you want to call him, earlier today. And he was trying to debunk the idea that this narrative about Haitian migrants stealing and eating people's pets is false. And he posted an interview montage with residents who apparently live in Springfield, Ohio, where they were trashing on these Haitian migrants who have showed up. And I kid you not, within less than 15 seconds of the interviews that he posted, one of the residents of Springfield got waved at by one of these Haitian migrants who was living in this town. The Haitian migrant, friendly wave. And this white guy responded by calling him a racial slur. He called him a sand monkey. And this is something that was posted by prominent right-wing influencers online with tens of thousands of likes. As if this is some sort of a verification that the story is accurate and not that it's a verification that this is an incredibly racist narrative that's being pushed right now by the right. This is completely unhinged. Trump was fact-checked during the debate on this, right? They said, we've gotten into contact with local authorities. They say there are no credible reports of this happening. And he, of course, says, well, I saw it on TV, and people are saying that this is happening, and so it must be true, right? Jesus Christ. Jesus fucking Christ, man. This is dark. Like some real dark shit that we're talking about here. The mask has fully come off when it comes to the issue of asylum seekers, of immigrants, of migrants, whatever you want to call them. Holy shit. Now, Kamala Harris responded to this, and this was part of one of the worst responses from Kamala, where she ended up bragging about how she has been endorsed by so many Republicans, right? Former, Trump employees who think that he's a threat to democracy, but she brought up Dick Cheney, guys. She brought up Dick fucking Cheney. Arguably one of the most egregious war criminals still alive on the face of the planet right now. He's up there with Benjamin Netanyahu, right? He may even surpass Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know. You guys would have to tell me on that. We're talking about a guy who launched an illegal invasion of Iraq, killed arguably millions of people, either directly or tangentially through these invasions that he launched in the Middle East, made millions and millions of dollars off of all of this. And now we have the Democratic nominee for president who is praising the fact that she was endorsed by the Cheneys. Dick Cheney, even in like the early 2000s, was widely seen as like one of the biggest villains in history. This should not be something that you're celebrating. Dick Cheney is not a well-respected statesman. He's a criminal. He's a monster. He is an evil human being who is shockingly somehow still alive to this day. But the fact that you would bring that up in a debate and brag about that, even just separating the morality from it, the fact that you think that that is a positive for you politically is wild to me. Absolutely wild to me. So her response to this situation wasn't good either, right? Now we also have Trump continuing to yell about migrants and whatever. We have Trump saying that we have historic violent crime right now, even though that's not true. He then went on to say that the FBI statistics are false because they're committing fraud. Kamala then went on to bring up his criminal charges that are against him. We had Kamala bringing up the fact that Trump said that he would terminate the Constitution to try to keep himself in power. We also had Trump, who was bringing up the fact that he possibly got shot in the ear and blamed Kamala and Biden for their aggressive rhetoric against him, for him getting assassinated, even though the person who attempted to shoot him was a registered Republican and, as far as we know, was not a fan of Kamala or of Biden. We also had Trump again falling for the bait. In this situation, it was Kamala saying basically that he is a Nepo baby, that he was gifted hundreds of millions of dollars from his father, Fred Trump. And of course, again, even though the question down here is, it's a question against Kamala, it's why are you a flip-flopper? It's why have so many of your policy positions changed? Even though that was an easy hit for Trump to get, he couldn't help himself. And again, defended himself on the amount of wealth that he was handed down by his father. We also had Trump with this short little moment here where, if you guys remember, back in 2020, I believe it was, Kamala had that moment with Mike Pence during the VP debates where she said, "I'm speaking," right? And that sort of became one of her famous taglines or catchphrases or whatever. And Trump had his own little minute of that. He said, "Wait a minute, I'm talking now." And then he said something like, "You remember that, or that sound familiar," right? So we tried to get his own little "I'm speaking" moment there. We also had, and this was also a disaster here for Trump, January 6th, right? The 2020 election. So Trump was pressed on this. Do you regret anything about January 6th? He says no. He says, "I had nothing to do with this," throwing the people who he urged to go to the Capitol and said that he was going to join them, throwing them under the bus. He blames Nancy Pelosi. He blames Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. And then here we get to the real kicker. He was asked directly again, "Do you believe that you lost the 2020 election?" He says no. He says no. Now, this is something that probably will piss off not just Democrats, but also a lot of independents and maybe even some Republicans as well. You're still denying that you lost the 2020 election. Kamala had a decent response to this. She basically said, he's struggling to process that he lost the last election. 81 million people fired Donald Trump. And I mean, again, he says, "I don't acknowledge that at all." He doesn't acknowledge it at all. 4 years later. Now, at this point, does he really still believe this? Is he that deluded? Or does he feel sort of trapped by his own previous rhetoric that he doesn't feel like he can backtrack on this or admit that he was wrong? I don't know. But we went through the whole process, guys. 60 plus different court cases. They tried to do the whole fake elector scheme. They tried January 6th. They tried to stop the count. They did everything in their power to try to keep Trump as the president. And they failed. They failed over and over and over again. It could be a potential problem in the 2024 election because you have many election deniers that are in key positions in swing states right now. So that's kind of terrifying, but still will not acknowledge the results of the 2020 election. It's just amazing. Now, he was fact-checked on this. He went on to continue to rant and rave. Scrolling down here to see if there was anything else that was kind of interesting. This was a pretty funny moment. Kamala Harris basically said that she's going around the world. She's talking to world leaders, and they're all laughing at Trump, right? Because he's a fool, he's ridiculous, he's not respected, he's chaotic, etc. Trump's response to this was to bring up Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, right? The authoritarian leader of Hungary, to say the least, right? First off, who the fuck outside of online right-wing circles even knows who Viktor Orban was, let alone knows him enough to have some sort of a gauge on whether or not his opinion should be respected? You're bringing up Viktor Orban as if that's some sort of evidence that you are a well-respected leader around the world. Viktor Orban. Who the fuck cares about Viktor Orban? This is like if Kamala brought up the opinion of the leader of Estonia. Americans would be like, well, who the fuck is that? And who cares what their opinion is about Kamala Harris? That's not remotely relevant to the conversation that's happening here. Viktor Orban likes Trump. And so I guess that means he's qualified to be president. Now, this was arguably the most depressing part of the debate. We had Kamala Harris and Trump, a back and forth on Israel. Let's go ahead and watch a little bit of this.
Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about it.
You're really trying to sell me on Kamala here. He says Kamala hates Israel and that Israel will not exist in 2 years if Kamala is president. Now, Kamala's answer The only thing that Erin Rupar posted here was sort of the back half of it, where she was doing her vapid virtue signaling about Palestinians deserve sovereignty and human rights and self-determination, etc., and we need a ceasefire. Okay, but how are you actually going to do that, right? If you are totally against cutting off the weapons to Israel, and Israel does not want a ceasefire, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is actively sabotaging a ceasefire. He's been doing this for months. How are you actually going to get that? She has no answer for that, right? So it's completely vapid virtue signaling. Israel is actively sabotaging any sort of a prospect for a two-state solution or for Palestinian sovereignty with their ongoing expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank. We understand all of that. Kamala's position on this is indistinguishable from the Biden administration's position on that, right? Which is a mistake both morally and also politically for her, because a ceasefire is overwhelmingly popular. Cutting off weapons to Israel is overwhelmingly popular, right? But even though Kamala Harris and the Biden administration have promised to and have followed through on doing everything and anything that they possibly can to bend over for whatever the Benjamin Netanyahu government wants, even if it means being totally complicit in a genocide in Gaza, even with that reality, Trump says she hates Israel and Israel will be gone in 2 years if she's elected president. So should give you a little bit of a gauge on this issue in terms of the bipartisan nature in favor of genocide, in favor of apartheid, in favor of an ongoing ethnic cleansing. This is the unfortunate and dark and bleak reality of American politics. We do not have a pro-Palestinian party. We do not have a party that is willing to criticize Israel. It does not exist. It just doesn't. It doesn't. We just had, by the way, and even just from the mainstream media perspective angle on this, this was basically the only question on this, right? It was about hostage negotiations and a ceasefire and et cetera, et cetera. Trump, of course, claims that none of this would have happened if he was the president. Okay, I call bullshit, but whatever. The mainstream media angle of this is that there were no other questions about this issue, right? Now, part of that is maybe because they kind of agree a lot on this issue, and so there wasn't much to talk about. But guys, we just had an American citizen who was murdered in cold blood, shot by an Israeli sniper in the West Bank, not even in Gaza, in the West Bank. This comes after 11 months of genocide. They've destroyed a majority of the housing. They bombed schools and mosques and churches and refugee camps and UN shelters. They targeted aid workers and journalists. Like, no questions on that. No questions on that. No questions on the torture camps that have been exposed where people are caught on camera sexually assaulting, raping Palestinian detainees. No questions about any of that. We had the standard lies from Kamala Harris on October 7th that there was sexual abuse on October 7th, even though there's no evidence for that. She has the time to bring that up, but again, not the sexual abuse of Palestinian detainees. No word on that. This entire section was abysmal, disgusting, shameful. I couldn't even come up with the words to describe how disgusted I was watching this entire segment of the debate. And honestly, the entire foreign policy debate, right? Because it wasn't good on any of the other foreign policy issues as well. They were basically just trying to out-hawk each other when it came to foreign policy. So that part of it was disgusting. We had Kamala again attacking Trump as weak on national security and how he's somehow in the pocket of China. We had Trump saying he wanted to stop the Ukraine war. Again, this is just sort of like magical thinking from him. Like, I also want the Ukraine war to end. I don't believe in this mystical narrative that, you know, we give them $100 billion more in weaponry and then they'll suddenly come out the other side victoriously and retake all of their territory. No, I think you need to actually stop the endless death and destruction and bloodshed and the loss of life and the destruction of Ukraine at some point. So I agree that the war should stop. But this is, again, part of the mythical thinking of Trump, where he just thinks, I'll snap my fingers on day one, I'll have a phone call with Putin, I'll have a phone call with Zelensky, and it's done, right? Or if I was president, none of this would have ever happened. So he doesn't really seem to have any real plan put in place. He just wants to claim this happened under Biden, it wouldn't have happened under me, let's please move on and not get into any of the specifics on that, right? Now, let's see if there's anything else interesting here, and then I'll finish off the video, right? We also had a moment here where, and this was throughout the entirety of the debate, Trump is still clearly frustrated that Biden dropped out. He doesn't like the fact that he's having to run against a new opponent and that it's Kamala, so Kamala gave him a little bit of a reminder in this clip saying, you're not running against Biden, you're running against me. You know, Trump brings up Putin having nuclear weapons. He was fact-checked a couple more times. They talked about the pullout of Afghanistan, and Kamala defended the pullout and said that we should have gotten out, which is true. Trump, of course, attacked her on that. We had a question about Trump's attacks on her racial identity. He did not handle this well, guys. He basically was like, well, I don't know what she is. Maybe she's black, maybe she's not. I read somewhere that she says she's black this day and says she's not black the other day, and, you know, typical shit there. Kamala, I think, handled that relatively well, kind of saying it's the same old tired playbook. Kamala brought up Trump's disgusting history with the Central Park Five and, his buildings denying housing to, non-white people. We had Trump saying that Kamala is Biden. Let's see. Anything else here? I mean, I think that's basically the gist of it here. Oh, this was another great moment. This will finish it off. Trump was asked about his healthcare plan, guys, and I kid you not, this is what he said.
Yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that.
I have a concept of a plan. Now, listen, if you want something that's less expensive and that it will result in better outcomes for the American people, it's Medicare for all. That's what it's called. Now, Kamala's not in favor of Medicare for all. I haven't heard her talk about the public option either. She wants to basically expand Obamacare, but Trump can't even... Dude, you've been in politics for like 10 years straight almost. You have no concept of... He says, I have concepts of a healthcare plan. Concepts? What the fuck does that mean? Are you in favor of single payer? Do you want to get rid of Obamacare and just allow the free market to reign? Like, what is your plan? What is your plan? He was asked about this multiple times. Trump has no, zero, nothing, nada healthcare plan. Guys, we have thousands of Americans with bankruptcy due to medical bills. Thousands of Americans struggling under that burden. People who are uninsured. People who are underinsured, people who can't afford co-payments and deductibles. And he has no plan, nothing. Oh, I have secret concepts of a plan that I'll wait until a later date to maybe tell you. Elect me, and then I'll come up with a more defined concept of a healthcare plan. Holy shit. Now, again, finishing off here, this is one of the longest videos I've ever done on this channel. Who won the debate? Well, I gave you guys my view on it, in terms of how the American people felt about it. So this was debate watchers here. We had Democrats said 63%, looks like for Kamala Harris, and Trump, we also had 37%. Now, they do a comparison here in terms of, how did Biden do? How did Trump do? How did it look back in 2020? So in terms of the Trump-Kamala face-off here, before the debate, 50% said Kamala was going to win, 50% said Trump was going to win. After the debate, that flipped to 63%, so a 13-point bump there for Kamala. So people clearly thought that Kamala won the debate. Only 37% said Trump did, and there you go. So significant overperformance for Kamala relative to Biden's absolutely abysmal first performance that literally created the demise of his political career. But in terms of the Broadscopes polling data, how much is this going to help Kamala? I don't know. Maybe a point, maybe 2 points in the national polls here and there. It's really hard to say. We'll have to see how the polling data plays out. I doubt it's going to have some cataclysmic effect on the Trump campaign, but you look at the overall here, guys. This is from Nate Silver. It's a coin flip. It's a coin flip. Kamala's ahead 48.9, and Trump has 46.7. So it's within a point, 2 points, right? Now you can look at the individual state polls, and it's about the same in all of these swing states, guys. So it's a coin flip. Now, keep in mind, in terms of the national polls, Kamala or Democrats generically usually have to be ahead by 4 or 5 percentage points to get an electoral college win, right? So it's honestly not looking great for Kamala. At this point, I would say maybe 55% chance Trump wins, 45% chance Kamala wins. It's a coin flip. It's a coin flip. Nobody can confidently say one way or another how this is going to go. So there you have it. Again, I think Broadscopes, even though I disagreed with many of the things that she laid out during this debate, and I thought it was kind of pathetic on a number of different fronts and way too right-wing for my liking, I do think that Kamala won this debate. And then again, the hawkishness on the border, on foreign policy, man, it's just bleak. American politics is just an absolute clusterfuck.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me. No one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying